Let's start with maybe the guy who's been the biggest disappointment through the first 4 weeks of the season, and that is Kenyan Drake. And I think after the first 3 weeks, Kimmi, we looked at him and said, okay, well, the matchups have been so-so, but this week it's the Carolina Panthers. Like, we're all in. Like, if it doesn't happen this week, then maybe we got to really think about what we're doing with Kenyan Drake. He had his worst fantasy performance of the year this week. So now we're 4 weeks in. Kenyan Drake has been disappointing. He struggled against one of the worst run defenses in the league. I mean, is it just time to give up on him? What are we doing?
I know, someone tweeted at us yesterday and was like, why is Kenyan Drake still on the undroppable list? I don't want any part of him. And then I saw another tweet this morning. It was Andy from Toy Story when he throws down his toys. And it was like all fantasy managers with Kenyan Drake on their squad. And it was, I don't want to play with you anymore. And that's understandable. As you can see on the screen, 13 rushes for 35 yards. But then he was not targeted once, and then he left the game in the fourth quarter and did not return. So I think for fantasy managers who bought into him really early in draft and spent a ton of capital on him, it's time to give him away because I really do not see this performance turning around at all. I understand it's still a small sample size, but you're right. It's a month into the season. I think you're really starting to understand how guys play, what their opportunities look like for the rest of the season. And I just don't think they're there for Kenyan Drake. I could see Chase Edmonds stepping up instead. So Kenyan Drake fantasy managers, I am so sorry. I did not buy into him, mostly because I couldn't even get him in drafts because he was going so high off the boards. So really, really, really disappointing.
I apologize because I was one of the people who definitely fed the hype train because I was all in on Kenyan Drake this year, and I thought it was really going to happen in a big way. He's still out on the field for a vast majority of the snaps. He's getting the majority of the opportunities, but you mentioned Chase Edmonds. He's starting to get more work there, and I don't know if this is going to become a true 50-50 split, but I do get the sense that gap is going to close between Kenyan Drake and Chase Edmonds as the season goes along. The bigger picture is, as much as we are excited about this Cardinals offense, in general, it has been fairly narrow. You get Kyler Murray, who's been mostly productive because of his ability to run the football. And then you get DeAndre Hopkins, who has been an absolute target machine through the first 4 weeks. Beyond that, it just seems there's nobody in this offense that we can trust. I know Christian Kirk had a touchdown on Sunday. We're still waiting for Kenyan Drake. Larry Fitzgerald has been absent. Even Andy Isabella, who I know a lot of the hipsters and the deep league players certainly like, he has been very volatile week to week. So I think after a month, we're sort of reevaluating this Cardinals offense as a whole, but especially Kenyan Drake because he has been one of the biggest disappointments. I understand if you want to be rid of him. I still just don't advocate just dumping him to the waiver wire. Try to package him in a trade. You can't trade him straight up. I know you're not going to get much for him in return, but maybe you make him part of a package and see if you can sort of deal him that way and get something back in return because the draft capital you spent to get him, it just makes it hard for me to put him out on the waiver wire and have him lost potentially with nothing to get back in return. DJ Moore, another guy that we thought was going to have a big year down there in Carolina. Instead, Robbie Anderson is doing all the things that we thought DJ Moore was going to do. Do we think it's going to get better, or is it really time to panic on him?
I think this is another panic button situation. And again, I wouldn't put him just straight up to the waiver wire. Again, I think it's a package deal. DJ Moore's not been playing so hot, but you know who has? It's Robbie Anderson. I think he is getting the shine of opportunities, all of those targets. It just goes to prove all you need to do to be a good receiver is to get away from Adam Gase. Get all the way away, and then you go to shine. DJ Moore only had 4 receptions for 49 yards versus the Cardinals on Sunday. Less than 9 fantasy points. Again, another guy at the wide receiver position who fantasy managers probably bought into really early in draft and spent a lot of capital. So the panic button is fully hit for me.
I'm very much freaking out on DJ Moore because it's interesting. If you sort of compare it to last year, the last couple of years, Robbie Anderson is what DJ Moore was. DJ Moore has sort of become what Curtis Samuel was, and Curtis Samuel has just completely dropped off the radar altogether. I don't know if it's that Moore is struggling to fit in the Joe Brady offense, if it's that he's just not working well with Teddy Bridgewater, but whatever it is, it just has not been the way we thought it would be. I mean, a lot of people thought that this was really going to be a season where DJ Moore fully broke out, where he had the potential to be a top 10 wide receiver, and it has not been close to that. Instead, Robbie Anderson has been that guy, and with Anderson, it's looking a lot more sustainable than it is with DJ Moore. From one DJ to another DJ, this one, David Johnson. And I know that the thoughts on David Johnson were a lot more mixed coming into the season, that certainly not everybody was high on him potentially bouncing back. I thought there was potential, but I began to be getting more cautious as we got toward the start of the season. Aside from that week 1 game where he looked okay against the Chiefs, it has not been good for David Johnson. Is this one you feel like you could maybe put him out on the waiver wire and not feel so guilty about it?
I think this one you could just sprinkle out on the waiver wire, and then like you just put it out there, and then you like look away, right? It's like if you ever do anything bad, or like you have a bad outfit and you're like, okay, I just did it once and then it's fine, I'm just gonna move on. I think that may be the situation in the conversation with David Johnson. I think instead Duke Johnson is getting some more opportunities. I know we're going from DJ to DJ to DJ, but Bill O'Brien, bro, what are you doing? What is happening? You gave up your best receiver, and then you have kind of this tizzy of running back situations. And I think in general, the Houston Texans have not been playing well at all, Deshaun Watson included. So I think this is a situation where you don't necessarily want to buy into this offense where there is a lot of hype and a lot of perceived opportunity, and then just no one has been able to deliver.
This is one of the pass heaviest teams in the league, in part because their defense has struggled, in part because that's just sort of how they want to play with Deshaun Watson. And so because of that, that does limit David Johnson's opportunities, certainly as a runner. And he's not getting a lot of targets because Deshaun Watson is just not known for checking down to his running backs. Like I said, early in fantasy draft season, I really had told myself this story where David Johnson was primed for a bounce back. As we got into August and closer to the start of September, I started to back off on that a little bit. And I think what we have seen the first few weeks sort of reinforced the idea that David Johnson, I don't want to say that he's washed, but just at least he's not a great fit in this Houston offense. And maybe he really is just sort of a middling depth back. So I think if you're certainly in 10-team leagues, I think you're fine to put him out there on the waiver wire. If you're in 12 or 14-team leagues or anything like that, I don't know that I'd advocate just dropping him straight out, but certainly I think you put him on the bench, and the idea that you can get something good for him production-wise maybe is going to be based on the matchup. If you can package him and get something for him, then I would certainly advocate doing that. Staying in Houston, I really thought yesterday was going to be a good day for Brandon Cooks. I liked Will Fuller, who played well, had a couple touchdowns. I thought Brandon Cooks would maybe produce as well against that Vikings secondary. 3 targets, 0 catches, 0 yards. That's not the kind of 300 game you were hoping from Brandon Cooks, and he's just been so up and down that, Kimmi, I think I'm done with him now.
You're done. It's a full breakup. There's no way to get over it. I know, again, when we were talking on our Fantasy Game Day show on Sunday, you were saying that you think Will Fuller had a ton of opportunities and he could really pop out and shine. Will Fuller, he went out and delivered. Another guy who got some opportunities was Kenny Stills. He even got one into the end zone. So I think you're right. I think it's maybe time to break up with Brandon Cooks, and I'm sorry about it. But again, this offense is struggling really, really badly. And I see guys like Kenny Stills stepping up and having way better of a relationship with Deshaun Watson, who really just needs to start airing the ball out so they can score some points and finally get a win on the season.
It's just such a mess with that Houston offense. I mean, even Deshaun Watson has been just okay so far this season. Will Fuller has been up and down. He's battled injury. Brandon Cooks, as we just talked about, has been just really, he had one game that was okay. The rest of it has just been awful. So I'm starting to be really skeptical of this Houston offense. And like I said, I think I'm done with Brandon Cooks. I will put him on the waiver wire. I will let him be someone else's headache. Tight end, as we talked about earlier, has been volatile yet again. We will always start and hope the tight end's going to be deep, and then we get to about this point in the season, we realize that tight end is not deep. Evan Engram has been one of the bigger disappointments of the season. I was hoping that maybe Sunday would be a game to get him going, thinking that the Giants would have to throw the football to stay in it against the Rams. I mean, it wasn't necessary because they didn't give up a ton of points, but still Evan Engram didn't give us much. Because tight end is so shallow, I'm loath to just completely release him back into the wild. But, I mean, what are we doing about Evan Engram right now?
You know, I think you're completely right because the dumpster fire situation at the tight end position. I personally am going to hold on to Evan Engram as tight as I can. And if I want, maybe put him on my bench and see if I have a guy who I can stream who has a better matchup. You know, you can try to grab a guy like Mo Alley Cox or Jimmy Graham who's really stepped up. But I do think the Giants, and I'm so sorry, Eddie, the Giants need help. they desperately need help, and you would kind of assume that Evan Engram would be the guy to step up, especially with Saquon Barkley out. A lot of this is dependent on Daniel Jones and that offensive line that are just getting him beat down into the ground. But then he had a play where it's like, did Daniel Jones just sack himself on his own turf? Like, what is happening here? I think, again, because the tight end position is so tough right now, I'm going to hold on to Evan Engram and just hope and pray and cross my fingers and try to sage him before every single game and give it up to all of the universe to have good thoughts with him. So I'm going to hold on a little bit longer, but it's just been a huge disappointment.
You drafted Evan Engram hoping that he would be your every week tight end, but now I think you're in a position where if you have him, you are sort of streaming. You're playing the matchups and you're hoping at some point he kicks in and he comes around. I know the Giants offense has struggled. I can't imagine it's going to be quite this bad all year long. They're going to start getting the football to some guys. Engram, I think, is going to be one of them. So I can't completely let him go, but I can't play him every week. So I'm going to play the matchups. I'm going to find the best streaming options, when and where I can, and hope that at some point the guy that I invested some draft capital in turns into the guy that I thought he would be back in August.